Dust swirled behind the old, beat-up Ford as it rattled into Harmony Gulch. The driver, a man named Jake, squinted, shielding his eyes from the sun. He had a smile that could charm a bird from a tree, but behind it lay a shadow, a past he desperately wanted to outrun. Harmony Gulch was small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Perfect. He needed somewhere to disappear, to start fresh. He hoped the town would offer him a second chance. He pulled up to the only diner, Ma's Kitchen, the sign creaking in the gentle breeze. He stepped out, stretching, and adjusted his worn hat. He was about to begin his new life, though little did he know his old one was about to catch up in the most unexpected way. This town was about to offer him much more than a second chance. It was about to offer him a love, a test, and a reckoning. Inside Ma's Kitchen, the air was thick with the smell of bacon and coffee. Jake flashed his winning smile at Ma, who barely glanced up from wiping the counter. He took a seat at the counter, ordering a coffee and a slice of apple pie. As he ate, he noticed the old photographs on the wall, faded images of Harmony Gulch's past. Farmers, families, and even a few old-timey outlaws. One picture stood out, a woman with a rifle, a determined look in her eyes. "Who's that?" he asked Ma. Ma chuckled. "That's Clara. Clara Bell used to be the best bounty hunter this side of the Mississippi. Now, she owns half this town." Jake's eyes widened. Clara Bell. He'd heard the name whispered in hushed tones, a legend. And she was right here, in Harmony Gulch. Later that day, Jake saw her. Clara Bell. She was even more striking in person than in the old photograph. She was tending to her garden, her hands calloused but gentle as she pruned a rose bush. Her eyes, though, were sharp, observant. He approached her hesitantly. "Ma at the diner told me you were quite the legend," he said, tipping his hat. Clara looked up, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Legends are just stories people tell," she replied, her voice a low, melodic drawl. "And you are." "Jake," he said, extending his hand. "Just passing through." Clara shook his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Welcome to Harmony Gulch, Jake. I hope your stay is interesting." There was something in her eyes, a knowing glint, that made Jake uneasy. He couldn't shake the feeling that she saw right through him. But he pressed on, drawn to her strength and beauty, and the promise of a life he desperately craved. Days turned into weeks, and Jake made it his mission to woo Clara. He brought her wildflowers, helped her with chores around the farm, and told her stories of his fictional adventures. He painted himself as a world traveler, a kind soul who had seen the best and worst of humanity. Clara, for her part, seemed to enjoy the attention. She laughed at his jokes, listened intently to his stories, and a genuine affection grew between them. The town watched, whispering. Some were happy for Clara, who had been alone for too long. Others were suspicious of Jake, wondering what a drifter wanted with a wealthy widow. But Clara seemed oblivious to the gossip, lost in the whirlwind romance. Jake, however, couldn't shake the feeling that Clara was always watching him, always assessing him. It was as if she were waiting for him to slip up, to reveal his true self. The wedding was a grand affair. The whole town turned out, dressed in their Sunday best. Clara looked radiant in a simple white dress, her eyes sparkling with happiness. Jake, standing beside her, was the picture of a reformed man. The ceremony was short and sweet, filled with promises of love and devotion. As they exchanged vows, Jake felt a pang of guilt. He was deceiving her, building his new life on a foundation of lies. But he pushed the thought away, focusing on the present moment. The reception was filled with music, laughter, and dancing. Ma's Kitchen catered the event, providing mountains of food and endless cups of coffee. However, amidst the celebration, there was an undercurrent of suspicion. Whispers followed Jake, questioning his motives, his past. Many believed he was only after Clara's money and land. The happiness felt fragile, a thin veneer over a pool of unease. Later, as the moon bathed Clara's farmhouse in a silvery glow, the newlyweds finally found themselves alone. The mood was romantic, intimate. Clara poured 2 glasses of wine, her eyes twinkling. "To new beginnings," Jake said, raising his glass. Clara clinked her glass against his, but her smile faded. "To truths revealed," she countered, taking a sip. Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" Clara set down her glass, her gaze unwavering. "I know who you really are, Daniel," she said, using his real name, the name he had tried so hard to bury. "I know about the bank robbery, the stolen gold, the men you left behind." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I know you're wanted, man." Jake's blood ran cold. The color drained from his face. He was trapped. Clara smiled, a predatory glint in her eyes. "And I, my dear Daniel, used to be the best bounty hunter in the West." "It's not true," Jake stammered, his voice trembling. "You're mistaken." Clara simply raised an eyebrow and walked over to a small wooden chest. She unlocked it and pulled out a faded wanted poster. There it was, clear as day. Daniel Jake Harding, wanted for robbery and murder. The reward was substantial. Beneath the poster, she produced a silver pocket watch, engraved with his initials. "Recognize this?" she asked, her voice cold. "Belonged to one of the men you left to die." Jake's shoulders slumped. He knew he was caught. The charming facade crumbled, revealing the fear and desperation beneath. The power had completely shifted. He was no longer the confident suitor, but a trapped animal, facing his reckoning. Clara held all the cards now. He was at her mercy. He braced himself, awaiting her next move. What was she going to do with him? Clara watched him, her expression unreadable. "I'm not going to turn you in," she said finally, surprising him. "Not yet." Jake stared at her, confused. "Why not?" "Because," Clara said, walking closer, "I want to see if there's any good left in you, Daniel. If there's any chance the man I thought I married actually exists." She continued, "You'll work on my farm. You'll earn your keep. And I'll be watching you, every step of the way. If I see any sign of your old ways, any hint of the man on that poster, I will not hesitate to turn you over to the authorities. Understand?" Jake nodded slowly, the weight of her words heavy on his shoulders. He was given a chance, but it came with a heavy price. He was now living under the watchful eye of a retired bounty hunter, his every move scrutinized. His fate rested entirely in her hands. The game had begun. The next morning, Jake's honeymoon was over. Clara handed him a shovel and pointed towards the fields. "Time to earn your keep, Daniel," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. Resentment simmered within him. He was used to scheming, not physical labor, but he knew he had no choice. He started digging, his muscles aching under the relentless sun. Clara watched him from the porch, her eyes like a hawk. She gave him the hardest tasks, the most unpleasant chores, mucking out the stables, fixing fences, weeding the garden. She seemed determined to break him, to push him to his limits. She constantly questioned him, probing for weaknesses, looking for any sign that he was still the man from the wanted poster. Every day was a test, a constant reminder of his past and his precarious situation. He was a prisoner in his own marriage, forced to prove his worth to the woman who held his life in her hands. But amidst the hard labor and Clara's relentless scrutiny, something unexpected began to happen. Jake, or Daniel, started to show glimpses of genuine kindness. He helped a neighbor whose barn had collapsed during a storm, working tirelessly alongside the other townsfolk. He rescued a stray dog, nursing it back to health and finding it a good home. Clara watched these acts, her expression carefully guarded. She saw him interact with the townsfolk, offering a helping hand, a kind word. She noticed the genuine concern in his eyes when he tended to the injured dog. Could this be the man she had hoped he was? These small acts of goodness were like cracks in the wall of his hardened exterior, allowing a flicker of light to shine through. They were unexpected, uncharacteristic of the man she knew from the wanted poster. They made her question everything she thought she knew about him. Was redemption possible, even for a man like Daniel Harding? Slowly, Clara began to lower her guard. She started to share meals with Jake, not just watch him eat. She told him stories about her past, about her life as a bounty hunter. She even laughed at his jokes, the genuine ones, not the ones he used to charm her. A complicated romance began to bloom amidst the tension. It was a fragile thing, built on secrets and mistrust, but it was there nonetheless. They found themselves drawn to each other, their shared history creating an undeniable bond. But the shadow of Daniel's past still loomed large. Clara knew she couldn't completely trust him, not yet. And Jake knew he had to keep proving himself, every single day, to earn her trust and perhaps, one day, her forgiveness. The cat-and-mouse game had evolved into something far more complex, a dangerous dance of love and redemption. One sweltering afternoon, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. It wasn't just any dust cloud. It was a posse of rough-looking men riding hard towards the farm. Jake recognized them instantly, his old gang. They stormed onto Clara's property, their faces grim, their intentions clear. Daniel, their leader, a scarred brute named Big Joe, bellowed, "We know you're here, and we want what's ours." They were after the stolen gold, the loot Jake had run off with years ago. But more than that, they wanted revenge. Big Joe's eyes fell on Clara. "Nice place you got here, lady," he sneered. "Too bad something might happen to it." The threat was clear. They were willing to destroy everything Clara held dear to get to Daniel and the money. Jake knew he had to do something, and fast. His past had finally caught up, and it was threatening to destroy his chance at redemption and the woman he was starting to love. 'Cause mind raced. He could run. He could disappear again, leaving Clara to face the consequences. It was what the old Daniel would have done. Self-preservation had always been his guiding principle. But he looked at Clara, standing tall beside him, her eyes narrowed, a familiar glint of determination in them. He knew he couldn't abandon her. Not this time. Not after everything she had done for him, everything she had risked. He took a deep breath. "The gold's gone," he said to Big Joe, his voice firm. "I spent it, but you're not touching her. This is between you and me." Big Joe laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "So, the coward finally wants to fight? All right, Daniel, let's see what you've got." Jake knew he was outmatched, outgunned. But he was no longer running from his past. He was facing it head-on, for Clara, for his chance at a new life. He was ready to fight. The showdown began. Big Joe and his gang charged, guns blazing. Jake, surprisingly agile, used his knowledge of the farm to his advantage. He led them through the cornfields, using the tall stalks as cover, setting traps he had learned to make while working the land. But he couldn't do it alone. Clara, rifle in hand, emerged from the farmhouse. Her bounty hunter instincts kicked in, and she moved with a speed and precision that belied her age. She picked off gang members one by one, using her sharpshooting skills to even the odds. Together, they fought, a strange but formidable team. Jake's resourcefulness and Clara's skill proved to be a match for Big Joe's brute force. They lured the gang into a ravine, using a rickety bridge as bait. The bridge collapsed, sending several gang members tumbling into the gully. The remaining outlaws scattered, realizing they were outsmarted. The gang was defeated, but not without a cost. During the fight, Jake had taken a bullet to the shoulder. He collapsed, his face pale, as Clara rushed to his side. "Daniel, Daniel, stay with me," she cried, her voice filled with panic. She dragged him back to the farmhouse and tended to his wound, her hands surprisingly gentle. She cleaned the bullet wound, stitched it closed, and wrapped it tightly. Days turned into nights as Clara nursed him back to health. She barely left his side, feeding him broth, changing his bandages, and whispering words of encouragement. As she cared for him, she saw a vulnerability in him she had never seen before. The tough exterior had melted away, revealing the scared, wounded man beneath. And she realized, with a certainty that surprised even her, that she had fallen in love with him. Not with Jake, the charming drifter, but with Daniel, the flawed but ultimately good man he was trying to become. Just as Jake was starting to regain his strength, the sheriff arrived, his face grim. The townsfolk had reported the gunfight, and he was there to investigate. He questioned Clara, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What happened here, Clara? I heard there was a whole lot of shooting." Clara hesitated, her mind racing. She could tell him the truth, turn Jake in, and collect the reward. It was what she would have done in her bounty hunting days. But she couldn't. Not anymore. She looked at Jake, lying weakly in bed, his eyes pleading. She knew what she had to do. Some outlaws came looking for trouble, she said, her voice steady. Jake helped me defend my property. We fought them off. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. Outlaws, huh? And who was this Jake helping exactly? Clara knew she was walking a dangerous line, but she couldn't turn back now. Her decision was made. The sheriff studied her face, his gaze unwavering. He knew Clara Bell. He knew she was tough, resourceful, and not one to be easily fooled. He also knew she was fiercely independent and didn't take kindly to interference. He looked at Jake, lying in bed, seemingly helpless. Something didn't add up, but he had no proof. All right, Clara, he said finally, his voice laced with skepticism. I'll take your word for it. But if I find out you're hiding something. He let the threat hang in the air. He tipped his hat and left, leaving Clara and Jake alone once more. Clara breathed a sigh of relief, but she knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The sheriff was suspicious, and he would be watching them closely. She had bought them some time, but their future remained uncertain. That night, as Clara sat beside him, Jake spoke. You shouldn't have lied for me, he said, his voice raspy. I'm not worth it. Clara shook her head. You are worth it, Daniel. You've changed. I see it. But Jake knew he couldn't stay. He was a wanted man, and his presence put Clara in danger. The sheriff would be watching them, and it was only a matter of time before his past caught up with him again. I have to leave, he said, his voice filled with regret. I can't stay here and risk your life. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She knew he was right, but it didn't make it any easier. Jake was now free, thanks to Clara's lie, but he was also a changed man, thanks to her love and her unwavering belief in him. He couldn't repay her by staying and jeopardizing her safety. He had to go, to start anew, and to prove that he was worthy of her sacrifice. The next morning, before the sun rose, Jake prepared to leave. Clara stood by the door, her face etched with sadness. I'll never forget you, Clara, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You changed my life. You showed me that I could be a better man. He promised her that he would live a good life, that he would make amends for his past mistakes. He would use the skills he had learned to help others, not to harm them. Clara stepped forward and cupped his face in her hands. I believe you, Daniel, she said, her eyes filled with tears. Go now and make me proud. They shared a long, lingering kiss, a bittersweet farewell to a love that could never be. Then, with a heavy heart, Jake turned and walked away, disappearing into the dawn. He left behind the only woman he had ever truly loved, but he carried her memory with him, a guiding light on his path to redemption. Time passed slowly in Harmony Gulch. Clara continued to run her farm, the memory of Daniel a constant presence in her heart. She often wondered if she had made the right decision, if he was truly living the good life he had promised. Then, one day, a letter arrived, postmarked from a distant town. It was from Jake. His letter detailed his efforts to make amends for his past. He was working as a carpenter, using his skills to build homes for the less fortunate. He was helping to rebuild communities ravaged by storms. He was, in every sense of the word, a changed man. He wrote of the guilt he still carried for his past actions, but also of the hope he felt for the future. He thanked her for believing in him, for giving him a second chance. He closed the letter with a simple, heartfelt message. I will never forget you, Clara. You saved my life. Clara smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. She knew she had made the right choice. She had seen the good in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. She had given him a second chance, and he had taken it, running not away from his past, but toward a better future. She folded the letter carefully, placing it in a small wooden box along with the faded wanted poster and the silver pocket watch, reminders of the man he once was and the man he had become. She looked out over her land, the golden fields stretching as far as the eye could see. It was a good life, a peaceful life. And though she would always miss Daniel, she was content. She had played her part in his redemption, and that was enough. She closed the letter, a satisfied smile playing on her lips, knowing that she had been a part of a unique and unconventional love story with a charming drifter who had ultimately found his way.